Hey folks, Ed here. Welcome to my Ask Me Anything for hitting 280K subscribers. The only way to start one of these videos is with gratitude. So first thing I want to say is thank you. If you've subscribed to my channel, you've helped the channel get to where it is now. Thank you very much for doing so. Your support means a lot. Thank you also for all the comments you guys have been leaving on my videos. Those are very, very encouraging and I greatly appreciate them. And it does encourage me to continue producing content for free on YouTube. With that said, let's get into some of the questions. Our first question, what books would you suggest for reading nonfiction and fiction? For this answer, I would say for fiction, I would recommend the Red Rising series. It's a series that I've gotten into over the last year and I've been hopelessly addicted to the plot. Fantastic story, fantastic character arts, fantastic writing. I've really enjoyed the series and I would definitely recommend that to anybody that wants an escape into fiction. For nonfiction, I would recommend Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I got a lot of wisdom out of that book and it's really short too. It's a short read that packs a big punch. Our next question, is command line programming still commonly used on routers and switches? This is a good question and I actually get this fairly often. The answer to this question is yes, it is still used, but less and less as time goes on and everything moves to software-defined networking and APIs controlling network devices. I don't think it'll ever fully go away. There'll always be some folks at a small home office that need to configure a router, configure a switch. So I do think it's worthwhile to invest in learning how to use the CLI for a particular router, particular switch. But as time goes on, more of that's going to be offloaded to software for sure. Next question comes from Pablo Rubens. First of all, congrats on your achievement. I'm a big fan of your content. My question is, with all the hype on quantum computing, do you think the current encrypt methods used in internet protocols are in danger? Thank you for the kind words. I'm glad you enjoy this content, Pablo. As for your question, with quantum computing, it's not so much the encryption algorithms. Those are actually safe. So AES is the most common encryption algorithm that's used. That's symmetric encryption. And AES is actually quantum safe. The key, if you will, is the key exchange that you use. Currently, the most renowned key exchange that you use in any modern security protocol is going to be Diffie-Hellman or even elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman. And neither of those are considered to be quantum safe. So some new key exchange protocols are being developed. I haven't really studied them in great depth, but I do plan on some point to potentially create some videos on it on this channel. Our next question comes from Harry Sharon. Awesome work, Eddie. You really deserve more credit, but I've got to ask, how do you read those dense RFCs, actually understand them, and then explain them so clearly to the rest of us? What is your secret? Great question, Harry. Those RFCs are pretty dense and pretty dry. I've often joked that they are a great cure for insomnia. I definitely cannot read them start to finish from the beginning to the end. I tend to kind of piecemeal my way through it. Often they're written from the perspective of an engineer trying to code those protocols. So from someone just trying to understand them, it might not necessarily be the best way to get through those documents. So I do like to jump around. Often I like to go to things like the actual exchange of messages and start from there to try and backtrack my way through why the messages are sent, what is contained in each message, and why that's important. As for understanding them, the key there is to always try and find out the practical implication of what you're reading, what it's there for. There's always a why behind everything. I'm not someone that can just memorize a bunch of information, but if I can understand how something works, I can then recreate the knowledge in my head. So when I'm trying to read something to learn it, typically my strategy is to understand the why behind it works the way it does. And that kind of helps the pieces fall into place so that I can then explain it to everybody else. Our next question is from Truth Reigns. The question is a NAS the best way to back up and store data for a Linux machine? That question, as with many things in tech, is going to be, it depends. If you only have one Linux machine, then I would say no. Really, the benefit of a NAS is if you have many devices all accessing the same storage. I would say a NAS for one Linux machine is probably more complication and more trouble than it's worth. At that point, you can just use a USB hard drive of sufficient size, or even at that point, you could even use some sort of cloud storage solution if you're trying to be mobile and access that from anywhere in the world. But if you have many devices that all need to access the same storage, then yeah, probably a NAS is going to be your best bet. Our next question comes from Ultimate Loser. His name, that's not what I called him. Which direction do you see as more promising for practical networking, beginner-oriented general courses, or more advanced courses on in-demand topics? Considering the overall focus on TLS and IPsec, do you plan to delve deeper into infosec? P.S. I'm the author of one of your reviews in the video. I'd like to thank you once again for Practical TLS. It completely spoiled me, and now I have high demands for educational material. Thank you again for the kind words, and thank you for leaving the review. I don't like to do a lot of selling and marketing, so word of mouth is essentially the best tool for me to use to grow my channel and grow my persona on the web and my courses. So thank you for leaving that review. As for your questions, I do like doing the beginner-focused content. I think there's a lot of value in understanding the basics in a practical and functional way. I think if you can really fill in the gaps at the bottom level, it helps you when you're trying to learn the more advanced things. I do plan to get into more and more advanced things. One of the things I run into is as much as I want to teach the advanced things on my channel, I can't unless I feel there's a sufficient base to start from. So that's why a lot of my channel covers a lot of the basics. And then from there, once I have the basics out of the way, I can then build on top of that. That's sort of what I'm trying to do with this IPsec series. That's why I released the Crypto Essentials series a little bit ago, covering cryptography in a modern and practical way, so that when I do teach IPsec, I don't have to stop and teach symmetric encryption in the middle of my discussion on IPsec. As for diving deeper into infosec or not, I don't plan to intentionally pivot towards infosec. Really, any good network engineer is also concerned about network security. So I do think there's a lot of overlap between network engineering, network security, and infosec. And I like kind of being at the meeting place between those three and potentially some other security related disciplines like cybersecurity or system administration or something like that. So I'm not making a formal pivot into infosec. It just happens to be some of the content that I've published more recently on this channel. Next question is from PX5N. Thank you, Ed. I would like to ask you for AMA. I am currently holding CCNA, AWS CCP, AWS SAA, and I'm studying for Encore. How do you retain all that information about networking and the details about protocols? Do you know it by heart, or do you make references to documents when you need it for the real world? The information is just so much, and I just wonder how professionals like you manage to retain it without forgetting. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. The important thing for me, at least, is to recognize that I am not good at memorization. So if I read a particular passage, I'm not someone that can just memorize the information in that package. But if I can understand how that package works, or like the why behind that particular paragraph or whatever the case, then I can typically re-explain it in my own words and then recreate the knowledge as needed in my mind. So for me, the goal is always to understand not just what is happening with a particular protocol or concept or feature or whatever the case, but why it happens that way, because then I can recreate the knowledge when I need to. That's typically my strategy. I know some folks are better at memorization. I am not. I actually think one of the reasons that I can teach as well as I do is because I suck at memorization. So I'm always essentially starting from zero in my own knowledge, in my own head, so that when I go to create curriculum, I'm starting from zero along with the student, and we're both essentially learning it together. As for referencing documentation, yeah, absolutely. Especially with since the growth of the internet and ChatGPT and AI and things like that, there's less and less value in being able to just quote and memorize large bodies of knowledge, as long as you can reference where it comes from or find it again easily. So yeah, I don't try and memorize any big documents or anything like that. I do reference them a lot as necessary, which I know might not help if you're taking certification exams. I'm sorry for that. In those situations, you will just have to memorize a bunch of stuff. But in the real world, when you're past the certification exams, yeah, referencing documentation is actually preferred because it essentially confirms the knowledge is what you expect it to be. Okay, so that's it for the questions for this AMA. Thank you for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to new content coming out on the channel. The next thing I'm going to be publishing is going to be a series on IPsec. I'm going to do some joint live study sessions as I develop that curriculum. So if you're interested in seeing how I go about creating my curriculum and creating my notes, definitely join for those. Look out for announcements on the channel for when those live streams will occur. Otherwise, thank you all for hanging out. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.